The call was from March 7th. I know that because the timestamp was the first thing I checked. March 7th, 2041 a.m. Inbound, non-emergency line. A woman reporting a smell of smoke coming from somewhere near her building. The problem is I was reviewing it on February 28th. The file was already in the system a full week before the date on the call. I want to back up and explain the job because I think that matters. My name is Joel, and for the last 14 months I've worked as a quality assurance reviewer for a regional emergency communications center in the Midwest. I won't say exactly where. I signed an NDA when I took the position, and even though I'm not sure this falls under what they'd consider proprietary information, I'd rather not test that right now. The center handles 911 and non-emergency dispatch for 3 counties. Not a huge operation. We have about 40 full-time telecommunicators across rotating shifts, plus admin, IT, supervisors, and then people like me. What I do is listen to recorded calls and evaluate them. That's basically the whole job. Every week, I pull a batch from the system randomly selected, plus any flagged ones, and I go through them using a standardized scoring form. I check whether the call taker followed protocol. Did they verify the location? Did they get the callback number? Did they ask the right questions in the right order? Did they dispatch the correct unit type? It's a checklist, essentially. There's a rubric. I score each call, log the results, leave notes, and if something's off, I flag it for the shift supervisor. The system we use for pulling and reviewing calls is called Inform. It's a recording platform made by a company called NICE. That's actually the company name, not a description. The audio files are tied to the CAD records, CAD being computer-aided dispatch, which is the system dispatchers use to log incidents in real time. So when a call comes in, the recorder captures the audio, and the CAD system creates an event record. The two are linked by an incident number. I can pull up a call by date, by position, by dispatcher ID, or by incident number, and the system gives me the audio along with all the metadata, timestamps, duration, channel, trunk line, the CAD event it's tied to. I usually work from a desk in a back office behind the dispatch floor. It's not glamorous. I've got a computer, a pair of over-ear headphones. Sony, the gray ones. I bought them myself because the ones they issue are terrible, and a mug that I fill from the coffee machine in the break room roughly 4 times a day. The office has no window. There's a filing cabinet I've never opened, and a poster on the wall about National Telecommunicator Week from 2019. I spend 6 to 8 hours a day in that room listening to other people's worst moments and grading the people who answered their calls on a scale of 1 to 5. It's not a bad job. I want to be clear about that. It's quiet. It's predictable. I like patterns. I like reviewing data and finding the small things. After a while, you develop a rhythm. You load a call, listen, score, notate, close next. Load, listen, score, notate, close next. Load, listen, score, notate, close next. Some weeks I'll get through 60, 70 calls. Other weeks it's slower because I'm doing targeted reviews or working with supervisors on remediation plans. But most of the time it's just me, headphones on, clicking through the queue. So, the February 28th thing. I need to describe what happened more carefully because when I first noticed it, I didn't even react. I thought it was a system error. I had pulled a random batch that morning. 25 calls from the previous 2 weeks, which is the normal sample window. The system is supposed to draw from a 14-day lookback, so anything from February 14th through the 27th would have been valid for that pull. I opened the batch list in Inform and the files populated the way they always do. A list with columns for incident number, date/time, duration, channel, position ID, and call type. I sort by date, oldest first, which is just my preference. It's how I've always done it. I started at the top. First few calls were routine. A traffic accident on State Route 9. Caller reporting a vehicle in the ditch. A medical call. Elderly male having chest pain. A noise complaint. Nothing unusual. I was maybe 40 minutes in, probably on my 5th or 6th call, when I loaded a file and looked at the header line. The incident number was 2025-03-07-0241-NE, which is our format, year, date, time, and a suffix for the line type. NE means non-emergency, and the date field in the detail pane said March 7, 2025, 0241-38. I remember looking at the date on my taskbar, February 28. My first thought was that someone had entered the date wrong in CAD. That does happen. Dispatchers are human. They're typing fast. Occasionally a date gets fat-fingered. February becomes March. Sick 2 becomes 3. I've seen it before. I noted it and moved on. I didn't even listen to the audio at that point. I just marked it as a metadata discrepancy and figured I'd flag it for IT so they could correct the CAD record. I went back to the batch and kept working, finished the rest of the polls for the day, wrote up my notes and left around 5. Drove home. Made dinner. Went to sleep. That should have been the end of it. The next morning, this would have been March 1st. A Saturday I wasn't working, but I kept thinking about the date on that file, not in an anxious way. More like when you can't remember if you lock the front door. It was just a loose thread. So on Monday the 3rd, when I came back in, the first thing I did was pull up that incident again. The file was still there, 2025-03-07-0241, 07-241, NE. Same timestamp. March 7, 2041 a.m. I opened the detail pane and looked at the full record. The CAD event had an address attached to a street I recognized, over in Glenmont, which is one of the smaller towns in our coverage area. The call was categorized as a smell of smoke investigation, non-emergency. The audio file was 4 minutes and 22 seconds long. This time I listened to it. The caller was a woman, maybe mid-50s from the sound of her voice. Calm. She said she'd woken up because of a burning smell outside her window. She thought it might be a neighbor's fire pit, but it seemed too strong for that, and it was the middle of the night. The call taker asked the standard questions. Any visible flames? No. Any alarms going off? No. Was anyone in distress? No. The call taker dispatched a single engine for an investigation. Textbook. Nothing interesting about the call itself. What was interesting was the metadata. I looked at the file properties in the system, and the audio file had a creation timestamp of February 26, 2025 at 11:14 p.m. The CAD record it was linked to also showed a creation date of February 26, but the incident date, the date the call supposedly happened, was March 7. So the recording existed 11 days before the event it was documenting. I sat there for a while, trying to think through how that could happen. The most obvious explanation was a test. Sometimes IT runs tests on the recording system, and those test files end up in the production environment. They're supposed to be purged, but occasionally one slips through. That would explain the wrong date. Someone manually entered a dummy timestamp, maybe for testing purposes, and forgot to delete the file. I went down the hall to talk to Marcus, who handles most of the system administration for the recording platform. I asked him if there had been any testing or maintenance on Inform recently. He checked his logs and said no. Nothing since January. I asked if it was possible for a file to get created with a future date. He gave me a kind of puzzled look and said technically anything's possible if someone manually edits the fields. But the system auto-generates the creation timestamp from the server clock, and the incident timestamp comes from CAD, so both would have to be wrong independently. He said it was more likely a sync error, maybe a glitch between the CAD server and the recording server, where one of the clocks drifted. He said he'd look into it. I thanked him and went back to my office. I figured that was probably it. A clock sync issue. I made a note in my log and moved on. March 7th came and went. I didn't think about it until March 10th, when I was reviewing a new batch and happened to pull a call from March 7th. It was from the non-emergency line. A woman reporting a smell of smoke near her building in Glenmont. The incident number was 2025-03-037024700927. Not the same incident number. And the time was different, 2:47 a.m. instead of 2:41, but the address was the same. The call type was the same. The description was the same. I pulled the audio and listened. It was the same woman. Same voice. Same cadence. She used almost the same words. Burning smell. Outside the window. Thought it might be a neighbor, but it seemed too strong. Almost the same words. Not exactly. In the earlier file, the one that shouldn't have existed yet, she said, I woke up and there's a smell like something burning outside my window. In the new one, the real one, I guess, she said, I just woke up and I can smell something burning. It's coming from outside, I think. Same idea. Same situation. But the phrasing was different. Not dramatically. Just the way anyone might say the same thing twice and not use the exact same words. I pulled up both files side by side. The original anomalous file, March 7th, 2:31 a.m., 4 minutes 22 seconds. The real file, March 7, 2:37 a.m., 4 minutes 9 seconds. Same caller, same event, same address. 6 minutes apart on the timestamp. 13 seconds different in duration. And the words were close but not identical. I didn't know what to do with that. I want to be honest here, because I think it's important. At this point, I was not scared. I was not unsettled. I was confused in the way you get when a spreadsheet formula isn't returning the value you expect and you can't figure out which cell reference is wrong. It was a systems problem. Something was duplicating files or generating phantom records. That was my working theory. I documented both incidents, saved the comparison notes, and sent an email to Marcus asking him to escalate the ClockSync investigation. He responded the next day and said he'd checked the NTP configuration on both servers and everything was in sync, no drift. He said the creation timestamps were accurate as far as the system was concerned. He couldn't explain it and suggested I file a ticket with NICE support, which I did. They responded about a week later with a forum response asking me to confirm my software version and send diagnostic logs, which I did, and then I never heard back. That's pretty standard for vendor support. In the meantime, I kept working, and about 4 days later, I found another one. This time it was a 911 call. The file was dated March 19, 18:12 p.m., a man calling about a car accident at an intersection in Harlow, which is the largest of the 3 towns we cover. The incident number followed normal formatting. The audio was there, clear, no distortion. The caller was panicked but coherent, said he'd just seen 2 vehicles collide and one had gone up onto the sidewalk. The call taker did their job correctly, dispatched fire, EMS, and a patrol unit. The problem was the date. Again, it was March 13th when I found it. 6 days early this time. I listened to the whole call. Checked the metadata. Creation date in the system, March 12, 11:47 p.m. Incident date on the record, March 19, 8012 p.m. The address was specific. I'm not going to name the intersection, but it's a real one. 4-way stop. There have been accidents there before. Everything about the call sounded legitimate. The background noise was right. The caller's breathing was right. The call taker's responses were real and matched our protocol. It wasn't generated. It wasn't a recording of a recording. I've listened to thousands of calls by this point. I know what a real one sounds like. But it was from the future. 6 days from the future. I sat there for a long time after that one. I remember taking my headphones off and just looking at the screen. The fluorescent light above my desk was buzzing the way it does when one of the tubes is going. I could hear faint radio chatter from the dispatch floor through the wall. I wrote down the incident number, the address, the date, and the time on a post-it note, and stuck it to the bottom of my monitor. Then I waited. March 19th was a Wednesday. I came to work that day, and I'll admit I was watching the clock more than usual. Around 8 p.m. I was still there, which isn't normal for me. I usually leave at 5, sometimes 6. But I was there. I was pretending to work on a compliance report. At 8:09 p.m. I pulled up the live CAD feed, which QA staff have read-only access to. At 8:14 p.m. a new incident appeared. Motor vehicle accident. The intersection I'd written on the post-it. I looked at the post-it. I looked at the screen. The time was 2 minutes off. The file had said 18:12. The real event came in at 8:14. I pulled the real call the next day, once it was in the system. The caller was a man, same as the pre-existing file. He described 2 vehicles colliding and one going onto the sidewalk. The real call was 3 minutes and 40 seconds. The anomalous file had been 3 minutes and 51 seconds. The voices matched. The words were close. Again, not identical. In the early file, the caller said the car jumped the curb and went onto the sidewalk. In the real call, he said it went up over the curb onto the sidewalk. Little things. Word order. Phrasing. I went home that night, and I didn't sleep well. Not because I was afraid exactly. I just couldn't stop running it through my head. 2 instances now. Both times a file appeared in the system days before the event it described. Both times the real event happened same location, same type, same color, but with slight differences. The timestamps were off by minutes. The durations were off by seconds. The words were similar, but not identical. like someone had described the same event twice from slightly different angles or slightly different moments. I started keeping a log. A personal one, not the official QA documentation, just a notebook I kept in my bag. I wrote down every anomalous file I found, along with its metadata, and then I'd wait to see if a corresponding real event occurred. Over the next 3 weeks, I found 6 more. I need to walk through them because the pattern is important, and also because with each one, the thing I couldn't explain got a little bigger. The third one was a welfare check. Dated March 23rd in the file, found on March 17th. A neighbor calling about an elderly man who hadn't been seen in several days. Address in Glenmont. When the real call came in on March 24th, 1 day later than the file predicted, the details matched closely. Same address, same concern. But the file said March 23rd and the event happened March 24th. The date was off by a day this time, not just minutes. That was new. The first 2 anomalies had been close on the timestamp, 6 minutes off, 2 minutes off. This one was a full day off. I noted that. The fourth was a structure fire. File dated March 28th, found on March 20th. A call from a woman reporting flames visible from a house at the end of her street. When it actually happened, it happened on March 28th, right on the date. The time was off by about 20 minutes, but the street was right, the description was right. In the pre-existing file, the caller said the flames were coming from the back of the house. In the real call, she said they were coming from the side near the back. Close. Not exact. The fifth was another traffic accident. Dated April 2nd, found on March 25th. This one actually happened on April 1st, 1 day early compared to the prediction. The location was the same. The type was the same. But the file had described a 2-car collision, and the real event turned out to involve 3 vehicles. One of them was a pickup that had been rear-ended into the intersection by a 3rd car. The original file didn't mention the 3rd vehicle. It was like, and I know how this sounds, it was like the file had an older version of the event, like a draft. I'm a QA reviewer. I'm trained to look for deviations. I measure performance against a standard. That's my entire job, and what I was seeing was deviation consistent, measurable, directional deviation. The pre-existing files were never perfectly accurate. They were always close. They were always shifted. And the shift wasn't random. It had a quality to it, a kind of drift. Like the file was describing something that was almost the event, but not quite. Almost the same call, but recorded from a slightly different version of the night. I don't know how else to describe it. The 6th anomaly was a medical call. Chest pain, elderly female, April 5th. Found it on March 29th. The real call came in on April 6th, off by 1 day. The address matched. The complaint matched, but the file said the patient was 72, and in the real call the caller said she was 74. That kind of detail. The 7th was a missing person report. A teenager hadn't come home after school. File dated April 9th, found on April 1st. The real call came in on April 9th, same date. But the time was off by about 45 minutes, and the kid's name in the file was slightly different from the real call. I'm not going to say either name, but imagine one call said Danny and the other said Daniel. That kind of difference. The same person, probably, but referred to differently. The 8th one is the one that changed things for me. By this point, I'd stopped telling myself it was a system glitch. I hadn't told anyone else about what I was tracking, partly because I didn't know how to explain it, and partly because I was worried about how it would sound. I'd mentioned the first file to Marcus and he'd been helpful but hadn't found anything. The vendor hadn't responded to my follow-ups. My supervisor, Linda, knew about the initial anomaly because I'd logged it in the official system, but she just noted it as a data integrity issue and moved on. Nobody was alarmed. Nobody else was seeing what I was seeing because nobody else was looking. The 8th file was dated April 14th. I found it on April 7th. It was a 911 call. The incident type was listed as a residential disturbance. When I opened the audio, I heard a man's voice. He was speaking quickly but not yelling. He said something like he could hear banging coming from the apartment next to his, loud banging, and someone was shouting. The call taker asked the standard questions. Could he tell how many people were involved? Did he hear anything that sounded like someone was being hurt? Was there a history of disturbances at this address? The caller answered. The call taker dispatched a unit. Nothing about this call was unusual. I hear disturbance calls every week. They're one of the most common call types. But there was a moment near the end of the recording. The call was wrapping up. The call taker was confirming the address, and in the background, faintly, under the caller's voice, I heard a second voice. Not the person being called about. Not the shouting from the apartment. Something else. It was quiet, like someone talking in another room, or maybe like audio bleed from another channel. I almost didn't catch it. I rewound and listened again with the volume up. The voice said a name. My name. It said Joel. I replayed it 6 times. The quality was poor, it was background noise, nearly buried under the primary audio. But it was there. A voice, gender unclear, saying what sounded like Joel. 2 of the 6 times I replayed it, I wasn't sure. The other 4 times I was. It was my name. I want to be rational about this. Joel is not an uncommon name. The caller could have had a TV on in the background. Someone could have been saying go or hold, and I was hearing it wrong. I know about auditory pareidolia. I know that if you listen for a word, your brain will find it. I know all of that. But I also know what I heard. I saved a copy of the audio to an external drive. I don't know why exactly. Maybe I wanted to make sure I could listen to it again if the file changed or disappeared. That sounds paranoid. I know it sounds paranoid. But by this point, I'd spent weeks watching impossible files predict real events, and the one thing I'd learned was that the files were not entirely reliable. They drifted. They shifted. Details moved. If the file could change between its version and reality, could it change in the system too? I didn't know. I didn't want to find out by losing the evidence. I took the external drive home with me. I did not listen to the file at home. I put the drive in a drawer in my kitchen and closed the drawer. April 14th came. The real disturbance call happened. Same building, same apartment complex. The time was off by about 30 minutes. The real caller was the same man, same voice, same complaint. I reviewed the real recording the following day. Same banging, same shouting in the background. But the moment at the end, the part where I'd heard my name, it wasn't there. In the real recording, the background noise at that point was just ambient. No second voice. No Joel. I listened to the real file over and over. It wasn't there. I went home and opened the kitchen drawer and plugged in the external drive and played the file I'd saved. It was still there. Faint, buried, but there. Joel. So the anomalous file had something the real one didn't. I started to develop what I'd call a theory, except it wasn't really a theory because it didn't explain anything. It was more like a description of the pattern. The anomalous files were previews. They showed events that were going to happen, but not exactly as they would happen. The details were close, but shifted. Dates were off by minutes, or hours, or a day. Descriptions were paraphrased rather than exact. Numbers were slightly different. And occasionally, at least once, the preview contained something that wasn't in the real event at all. An extra detail. My name in the background of a call that, when it really happened, didn't include my name, which meant the files weren't recordings of the future. They were recordings of something adjacent to the future, something nearby, something that almost happened, or was going to almost happen, or, I don't know. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me talk about what I did next. I went back through the entire system and ran a search for any file with a creation date earlier than its incident date by more than 24 hours. This was something I could do through the admin query tool, and Marcus had given me read-only access to the diagnostic panel months ago for a different project. I filtered for the current year and let it run. It returned 41 results. 41 files in the system with a creation date that preceded their incident date by more than a day. Some of them were the ones I'd already found, but most of them were new to me. I opened a spreadsheet and started cataloging them. For each one, I logged the creation date, the incident date, the call type, the location, the duration, and whether a matching real event existed in the system. This took me the better part of 3 days. I did it during my normal work hours, mixed in with my regular QA reviews, so nobody asked what I was working on. Linda doesn't micromanage. As long as my weekly numbers are where they should be, she doesn't care how I spend my time. Of the 41 files, 34 had a corresponding real event that had already occurred. The dates were off for all of them by varying amounts. The shortest discrepancy was 4 minutes. The longest was 3 days. The details drifted in the same way I'd already documented. Close, but not exact. Paraphrased rather than verbatim. Small facts changed or shifted. 5 of the files corresponded to events that hadn't happened yet. Their incident dates were in the future, ranging from a few days to about 2 weeks out, and 2 of the files had incident dates that had already passed, but I could find no corresponding real event. No matching call, no matching CAD record, no dispatch. The event they described simply hadn't happened, or hadn't happened yet at a shifted date, or had happened in a way I couldn't match. One of those 2 unmatched files was a medical call from an address in Harlow. Elderly male, difficulty breathing. The incident date was March 31st, but I was looking at it on April 10th, and no call had come from that address. I checked the CAD logs manually. Nothing. It was possible something had happened there that just wasn't called in. But the file contained audio of a 911 call, so someone had called. Or would have called. Or almost called. The other unmatched file was different, and I need to describe it carefully. The incident date was April 21st. I found it on April 10th. The call type was listed as a 911 hang-up, which is when someone dials 911 and disconnects before speaking, or after only a few seconds. We get those regularly accidental dials, pocket dials, kids playing with phones. The dispatcher calls back, confirms no emergency, done. But this file was 7 minutes and 38 seconds long. That's very long for a hang-up. I opened it. The first 15 seconds were silence. Then there was a sound like the phone being shifted or set down on the surface. Then breathing. Just breathing for about 40 seconds. Then a voicemail, quiet, strained, said, "I don't know what's happening." That's all. That was the only speech in the entire file. 7 minutes and 38 seconds, and the only words were, "I don't know what's happening." The rest was breathing, occasional ambient noise, and then a click at the end. The call taker never spoke. There was no dispatcher audio at all, just the open line. I played it back and tried to analyze the background sounds. There was a low hum, like an HVAC system or a refrigerator. At one point around the 4-minute mark, there was a faint sound that might have been a door closing in another room. Around 5 minutes, the breathing changed, got a little faster, a little shallower. Then it slowed again. The man said nothing else. The line stayed open till the 7-minute mark and then cut off. No address was listed in the detail pane. The location field was blank. The callback number field showed a 10-digit number, but when I ran it through the reverse directory we have access to, it didn't match any listing. The number wasn't associated with a name or an address in our system. The caller ID field said "Uainable." I listened to it 3 more times that day. I was trying to figure out why it bothered me as much as it did. It wasn't the content exactly. Hang-up calls with minimal speech aren't that unusual. People call in distress and can't articulate what's wrong. It happens. I think what bothered me was the voice, not that I recognized it. I didn't, not on the first few listens. It was quiet and strained and hard to place. But there was something about the cadence, the way the man said, "I don't know what's happening." The rhythm of it, the vowels, the particular way the words fell. It was like hearing a song in a genre you know, but can't identify the artist. I listened to it again when I got home. I'd copied it to the external drive. I sat at my kitchen table and played it through my laptop speakers and then through my headphones. I said the phrase out loud. "I don't know what's happening." Then I played the recording again. The voice was mine. I want to be careful here. I'm not saying this with certainty. I know my own voice sounds different to me than it does recorded. Everyone experiences that. When you hear a recording of yourself, it sounds wrong. The pitch is higher, the timbre is thinner, because you're used to hearing your voice conducted through the bones of your skull. So when I say the voice sounded like mine, I mean it sounded the way I sound on recordings. The way I sound on voicemails, on videos other people have taken of me. On the few occasions I've tested the recording system and heard my own voice played back, it sounded like me. The cadence was mine. The particular way I flatten my vowels when I'm tired. The slight nasality, the pacing. It wasn't a perfect match. It was strained, quieter, and there was a quality to it I couldn't quite place. Something off about the tone, like the person was speaking through something or was slightly out of breath. But it was close. It was close enough that I closed my laptop and put it away and went to bed and didn't listen to it again for 2 days. During those 2 days I kept going to work. I kept reviewing calls. I followed my routine. Load, listen, score, notate, close, next. I maintained my numbers. I attended a staff meeting where Linda talked about an upcoming audit and a new form template we'd be switching to. I drank coffee. I did my job. But I was thinking about it the whole time. I was thinking about the voice and the date April 21st and the fact that the file had no address, no callback number, no dispatcher response. A 7-minute open line with someone who might be me saying 5 words and then breathing until the call disconnected. On April 14th, the day the disturbance call had its real-world match, the one where my name had disappeared from the background noise, I made a decision. I was going to go through every single anomalous file and listen for any other reference to me. Any mention of my name, any voice that sounded like mine, any detail that connected to my life specifically. This took a week. I went through all 41 files. Most of them were straightforward routine calls about routine emergencies involving people I didn't know, at addresses I had no connection to, but I started noticing things I'd missed before. Small things. In one of the fire calls, the caller mentioned a street name. The street where the fire was happening wasn't one I had any connection to, but in the background you could faintly hear a radio or TV, and the audio coming from it mentioned a road closure on Millhaven Road. Millhaven Road is the road I take to work. In the welfare check call about the elderly man, the caller gave the man's apartment number as 14B. My apartment number is 14B. In the missing teenager call, the caller mentioned that the kid had last been seen walking near a strip mall. The strip mall she described based on the cross street she gave the dispatcher was the one where I get my hair cut. These could be coincidences. They probably are coincidences. I cover 3 counties. There are only so many roads and so many strip malls, and apartment numbers only go so high. If you look for connections to your own life in a large enough data set, you will find them. That's just statistics. That's selection bias. I know this, but I wasn't selecting randomly. I was finding these details in files that predicted the future. Around this time, I started having trouble sleeping. Not dramatically. I wasn't having nightmares or lying awake in a cold sweat. I'd just wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning and not be able to get back to sleep. I'd lie there and think about the files. I'd think about the drift, how the files were always close but never exact, how the timestamp shifted, the details migrated, the words rearranged themselves between the preview and the real event. I'd wonder what determined the degree of drift. Was it random? Was it proportional to how far ahead the file was? The first anomaly had been off by 6 minutes, and it was about a week ahead. The third had been off by a full day and was also about a week ahead. The fifth had been off by a day in the other direction. The real event came earlier than predicted. Was there a function? Was there a formula? I started trying to map it. I made a chart in my notebook horizontal axis for how far ahead the file appeared before the event, vertical axis for how much the details deviated from reality. I assigned a rough deviation score to each file based on how different it was from its real-world counterpart. Timestamp difference, factual discrepancies, phrasing changes. I spent an evening trying to see if there was a correlation. There wasn't, or if there was, I couldn't find it with 8 data points in a subjective scoring system. The drift seemed almost arbitrary. Some files that appeared weeks early were very close to reality. Others that appeared just days early had significant deviations. There was no clean line, no formula, just a pattern that almost made sense but didn't. That in itself was unsettling. If the system were malfunctioning in some mechanical way, you'd expect the errors to be consistent. If it were some kind of echo or duplication, you'd expect the copies to be exact. What I was seeing didn't fit any failure mode I could think of. It was too accurate to be random and too inaccurate to be a simple copy. I went back to Marcus one more time. This was around April 16th. I didn't tell him everything. I didn't mention the drift or the pattern or the voice. I just asked him again if he'd found anything unusual in the system logs, any unauthorized access, any automated processes that might be generating files, any third-party integration that could be feeding data in from an external source. He checked and said no. Everything was clean. He suggested maybe I was seeing test records from a legacy system that had been migrated over incorrectly. I asked if that was possible, and he said he'd look into it, but I could tell he was already past caring about it. To him, it was a minor data issue, an annoyance, not an emergency. I want to talk about April 18th, because that was the day I checked the 5 pending files, the ones with future incident dates that hadn't arrived yet. I'd been tracking them. I had their dates written in my notebook. 2 of them had already resolved by this point. The events had happened, close to the predicted dates with the expected drift. 3 remained. One of them was dated April 21st. The hang-up call. The one with my voice. The other two were dated April 24th and April 29th. I'll describe the April 24th one briefly because it's relevant. It was a 911 call from a woman reporting that her husband had collapsed in their kitchen. Medical emergency, possible cardiac event. The address was in Harlow. The audio was clear, and the woman was in distress crying, speaking fast, giving their address and her husband's name. The call taker dispatched EMS. Narration was about 5 minutes. I decided to wait for April 21st. I had 3 days. I want to describe those 3 days because I think they say something about what this experience does to you. I went to work each day. I reviewed calls. I did my job, but I was slow. I'd catch myself pausing audio files and just sitting there. I'd load a call and forget to press play. I'd look at timestamps and check them against the calendar, not because I suspected anything was wrong with them, but because I'd developed the habit of checking. I checked everything twice. I opened files, closed them, opened them again. I'd scroll through the CAD logs and look at incident times and creation dates and compare them just to confirm they were normal. I was developing the kind of verification compulsion. I needed to confirm that reality was still working the way it was supposed to. Linda noticed I was behind on my weekly numbers. She asked if everything was okay. I said I was dealing with some system issues and it had slowed me down. She told me to let IT know and try to catch up by the following Monday. I said okay. On the evening of April 20th, I was at home. I was sitting on my couch. I had the TV on, but I wasn't watching it. I was thinking about the next day, April 21st. The date on the file, the 7-minute call, the voice that might be mine saying, I don't know what's happening. I tried to think about it logically. If the pattern held, the real event would happen somewhere close to April 21st. 21st maybe that day, maybe a day before or after. It would be similar to the file, but not identical. Some details would be different. The drift would apply. So what would the real event look like? A 911 hang-up, probably, from a number that wasn't in the system. A long silence. Someone saying something, or maybe saying nothing. Breathing. Disconnection. Would it be me? Would I be the one calling? Was there going to be a moment on or around April 21st where I picked up my phone and dialed 911 and said, I don't know what's happening, and then just sat there breathing for 7 minutes? I went to bed early. I slept badly. April 21st was a Monday. I drove to work the same way I always do down Millhaven Road, past the gas station, through the light at Commerce, into the parking lot behind the building. I swiped my badge and went in through the back door. I walked past the dispatch floor where I could see the night shift wrapping up. I went to my office. I sat down. I turned on my computer. I opened Inform. I opened my email. I opened the CAD viewer. I watched the system all day. Every 911 hang-up that came in, I checked the details. There were 4 that day, all resolved quickly, all traced to accidental dials. None of them were unusual. None of them were 7 minutes long. None of them involved a male caller saying 5 words and then breathing. By 5 o'clock, nothing had happened. I stayed until 8. Nothing. I stayed until 10. The evening shift dispatcher, a woman named Carolyn, poked her head into my office around 9:30 and asked if I was working late. I said I was catching up on some reviews. She nodded and left. At 10:15, I went home. Nothing had happened. April 22nd, nothing. April 23rd, nothing. April 24th, the day the other pending file had predicted a cardiac event in Harlow. I checked the CAD logs throughout the day. At 6:38 p.m., a 911 call came in. Woman reporting that her husband had collapsed. Harlow address. Same address as the file. I pulled the real recording the next morning. Same woman, same event, same husband, same kitchen. The time was off by about 3 hours. The file had said 3:15 p.m. The real call was at 6:38, but it happened. The April 21st call did not happen. It was the first anomalous file that had no real-world match at all, like the medical call from March 31st that I'd never been able to match another phantom. An event predicted by the system that, as far as I could tell, simply didn't occur. Except, on the evening of April 21st, when I'd been sitting at my desk past 10 o'clock watching the system and waiting for something to happen, I'd felt strange. Not sick, exactly. More like a sudden, diffuse anxiety, the kind where your chest gets tight and your breathing speeds up and you can't point to why. It lasted maybe 10 minutes. Then it passed and I drove home. I didn't think about it at the time. It was just stress. I'd been sleeping badly for weeks. I was obsessing over something I couldn't explain. Of course I felt anxious. But later, I thought about the breathing on the file. The way it changed around the 5-minute mark got faster, shallower, and then slowed again. And I thought about my breathing in that moment at my desk, how it had sped up for no clear reason, and then slowed. And I thought about how the drift works, how the real events are close to the files but never exact, how the details migrate, how sometimes the deviation is tiny 6 minutes, a word rearranged, and sometimes it's large a whole day, a third vehicle, a missing detail. And I thought about what a maximally drifted version of that call might look like. Not a man on an open 911 line saying, "I don't know what's happening," but a man sitting alone in a room at the same approximate time, feeling something he couldn't explain, with his breathing changing in the same pattern and then going home. Same event, maximum drift, no call made, no words spoken, just the feeling displaced and diluted, happening to the right person at approximately the right time. I know how that sounds. I know it's a stretch. I know I might be constructing a narrative out of coincidence and sleep deprivation and the particular kind of tunnel vision that comes from staring at data too long. I know all of that. I kept working. The 5th pending file one, dated April 29th, was a non-emergency call about a noise complaint. Barking dog, repeated issue, caller requesting animal control. I tracked it passively. On May 1st, a noise complaint came in from the same address. Barking dog. Same caller. 2 days late, details slightly different. The caller said the dog had been barking all night in the file and since about 11 in the real call. Normal drift. By this point, I had matched 37 of the 41 anomalous files to real events. 2 remained, unmatched the March 31st medical call and the April 21st hang-up. Both files still existed in the system. I checked them periodically to make sure they hadn't changed or disappeared. They hadn't. In early May, I ran my query again. Same parameters, creation date, preceding incident date by more than 24 hours. It returned 53 results. 12 new files since the last time I'd checked. 12 more events that hadn't happened yet. I opened the spreadsheet and started adding rows. Most of them were mundane. Traffic stops, medical calls, noise complaints, a burglary report, a request for a welfare check. All from addresses in our 3-county area. All with audio, all with full CAD metadata, all with incident dates ranging from a few days to about 2.5 weeks in the future. I didn't catalog all of them individually. I was tired. The pattern was established. What was I going to do? Track everyone? Wait for each event and confirm it happened with slight variations? I'd been doing that for 2 months. The answer was always the same. The files were close. The real events drifted. The system kept generating new ones. But there was one file in the new batch that I need to talk about. It was dated May 14th. Incident type 911, residential. The audio was 2 minutes and 41 seconds. I pressed play and heard a phone ringing the incoming ring, the one the system records before the call taker picks up. 3 rings. Then a click in the call taker's voice. 911, what is the address of your emergency? Then a woman's voice, quiet but steady. I need someone to come to the apartment. Something's wrong with. And then she said a name. She said a name. She said my name. My full name. First and last. She said my full name and said something was wrong. The call taker asked for the address. The woman gave one. It was my address. My apartment building. My unit number. 14C. She said 14C. The call taker asked what was wrong. The woman said she didn't know. She'd come over because, and then the audio got unclear. There was a rustling sound like the phone was being moved, and then about 20 seconds of muffled noise. Then the woman came back and said, "He's just sitting here. He's not, I don't think he's." And then the file ended. Mid-sentence. Just cut off. I sat in my office. The fluorescent light was buzzing. I could hear the dispatch floor through the wall. Someone laughing, a phone ringing, normal sounds. The mug on my desk was still warm. The woman's voice, I didn't recognize it. I tried to figure out who it might be. I don't have many people in my life who would come to my apartment. My parents live in another state. I have a sister I talk to maybe once a month. I have a few friends, but none who have a key or would just show up. There's a woman on my floor, 2 doors down, who I say hello to sometimes. We've talked maybe 10 times total. She's in her 30s, dark hair, works in something medical, I don't remember what. Her voice might match, or it might not. I honestly don't know what her voice sounds like when she's upset. The file was dated May 14th. That was 9 days away. I saved a copy to the external drive. I closed the file. I sat there. I didn't know what to do. I need to be honest about that, because what were my options? Tell someone? Tell them what? That I'd found recordings in our emergency system that predict the future, and one of them predicts something happening to me at my apartment in 9 days? They'd think I was having a breakdown, and maybe they'd be right. I'd spent 2 months privately tracking impossible files and sleeping 4 hours a night and developing compulsive verification behaviors. From the outside, that looks like a problem. I could go to Marcus again, but he'd already done everything he could. I could go to Linda, but she'd tell me to take a day off and maybe call the employee assistance program. I could go to IT, but they'd do the same thing Marcus did, check the logs, find nothing, shrug. I could just not be in my apartment on May 14th. That thought settled on me with a strange clarity. Just don't be there. Go somewhere else. Visit my parents. Get a hotel room. Be anywhere but 14C on May 14th. If the file was predicting something bad happening to me at my apartment on that date, the simplest response was to not be there. But then I thought about the drift. The real events never matched the files exactly. Dates shifted. Times shifted. Sometimes by minutes, sometimes by days. What if I wasn't there on the 14th, but whatever it was happened on the 15th, or the 13th, or the 12th? How long would I have to be gone? A week, 2 weeks, and what would I actually be avoiding? The file didn't describe a crime. It didn't describe a disaster. It described a woman calling 911 because something was wrong with me. That could mean anything. A medical emergency. A fall. A mental health crisis. Something I couldn't prevent by being somewhere else because the problem was me. I went to work the next day. And the day after that. I kept reviewing calls. I kept pulling batches and scoring and notating. The rhythm of the job was the only thing holding me in place. Load, listen, score, notate, close, next. On May 10th, 4 days before the date on the file, I ran the anomaly query one more time. 67 results. The number was growing. 14 new files since my last check. I didn't go through them all. I scanned the list for any incident date close to May 14th, and for any mention of my address or name. I found one more. It was dated May 14th as well. Same date as the other file, but a different time later, about 40 minutes later. The incident type was listed as a medical response. The audio was short, only 51 seconds. It was a dispatcher. I recognized her voice. It was Carolyn radioing an EMS unit and giving them my address. She gave the apartment number, 14C. She said the call type was an unconscious person, unknown medical history. Unconscious. That was new. The first file had the woman saying something was wrong and that I was just sitting here. This one had the dispatch side, the part that happens after the call taker processes the information and sends it to the dispatcher, who then contacts the response unit. The system had recorded both sides, the call and the dispatch, 2 files, same event, same apartment, same date. In the dispatch recording, Carolyn's voice was normal, professional. She gave the address, the cross street, the apartment number, the call type. She said the caller was on scene. She gave the callback number, the same unlistable number from the April 21st hang-up file. I checked. It was the same 10 digits. That detail, the callback number, is what made me pause. Because it meant the woman calling about me on May 14th was calling from the same number that was associated with the April 21st hang-up. The hang-up that had my voice on it. The one that hadn't happened. The one where the drift had been maximum, where the event had dissolved into just a feeling. It was connected. I'm sitting in my office right now. It's May 12th. I have 2 days. I'm not sure what that means, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I've been thinking about it in the same way I think about any quality issue, looking for the deviation, trying to measure the drift, trying to predict what the real event will look like versus what the file describes. The file shows me unconscious in my apartment. A woman calls 911. Carolyn dispatches EMS, if the drift applies, and it always applies. then the real event will be close but not exact. Maybe I won't be unconscious. Maybe I'll be somewhere near my apartment, but not in it. Maybe the woman will call for a different reason. Maybe the date will shift. Maybe the whole thing will dissolve, like the April 21st call, into a distant echo, just a feeling of wrongness at approximately the right time, in approximately the right place. Or maybe this will be the one that doesn't drift, the one where the file and reality converge, where the preview and the event are the same. I don't have enough data to know. 8 weeks of observations isn't enough to build a reliable model. The sample is too small. The variables are too complex. That's the part that gets me. After everything, all the files, all the comparisons, all the nights spent cataloging deviations in a notebook, I still don't have enough data. A QA reviewer without enough data, that's the whole problem. I want to say one more thing. Yesterday, May 11th, I ran the query again, just to check. Just because I check now, because that's what I do. 71 results. 4 new files. I didn't want to look at them. I looked anyway. 3 of them were routine: a traffic call, a medical call, an animal complaint. Future dates. Normal stuff. They'll happen, or they won't. They'll drift, or they won't. They'll drift, or they won't. Its incident date was May 14th. Same date as the other 2 files involving me, but it wasn't a 911 call and it wasn't a dispatch recording. The call type was listed as men-design, internal. That's a code I've seen before. It's used for internal communications, like when a supervisor calls another department, or when IT runs a line test. The calls are recorded the same way. They go into the same system. They just get tagged differently. The audio was 9 seconds long. I played it. There was a brief tone, the kind the system generates when a recording starts, and then a woman's voice. Not the same woman from the other file. A different voice, older and more clipped. She said, "This is Linda Mercer calling to confirm that the QA position has been," and then it cut off. 9 seconds. That was it. Linda Mercer is my supervisor, and the sentence she didn't finish could end a lot of ways. The QA position has been filled, has been posted, has been reviewed, has been vacated. I don't know which word comes next. The file cuts off before she says it. I'm still sitting in my office. The fluorescent light is buzzing. My coffee is cold. The dispatch floor is quiet right now, mid-afternoon lull. The mug has a chip on the rim that I keep meaning to replace but never do. The poster on the wall still says National Telecommunicator Week 2019. The filing cabinet is still closed. The gray Sony headphones are on my desk, the cable coiled the way I always coil it, in a figure 8, because that's how you keep cables from getting tangled. I learned that from a sound engineer I worked with at a job I had a long time ago. Before any of this. I'm going to go home tonight. I'm going to drive down Millhaven Road, past the gas station, through the light at Commerce, and I'm going to park in the lot at my apartment building and walk up to 14C and put my key in the door and go inside. I'll probably make something to eat. I'll probably sit on the couch. I'll probably try to sleep. And in 2 days, I'll either be here at my desk running the query again, or I won't. The system will still be generating files either way. I checked this morning and the total is up to 73. 2 more overnight. I didn't open them. I don't know what they say. I don't know whose voice is on them. I don't know what events they describe, or when those events will happen, or how far they'll drift when they do. The system doesn't care whether I look. It keeps recording. That's what it's designed to do. I just don't know what it's recording from.